I am not going to, with my white privilege, wag my finger at the Muslim community in Dearborn and say, you got to get out there and stop Trump. No, actually, what they want is to have not another cousin die.
Last week, you heard my message to Kamala Harris on how she needs to do more to win the Arab American vote. And while you may have been listening to me, there's a slight chance that she wasn't, but maybe she will listen to my next guest, who also shared a similar message to her quite recently. Academy Award-winning filmmaker and Emmy Award-winning TV host Michael Moore posted his own plea to Vice President Harris, stressing the need for her to win in Michigan, his home state, where he says, quote, the vast majority of Arab voters are either going to stay home or they will show up to vote but leave the president line blank. Michael Moore's message goes on to outline not only what Harris is getting wrong, but he also explains what she can do to make things right. And he joins me now to talk all about it. Michael Moore, thank you for coming back.
And really quickly, just before we dissect further the wonderful conversation that Mehdi Hasan and filmmaker Michael Moore are about to have, I want to set the table for everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Nothing Burger. I'm your host, Zach. And I think the important thing to remind everyone about Michael Moore is this is a guy who's been doing this for a long time. Now, you may have heard a number of things about the man. He's been the victim of countless smear campaigns by Republicans, and sometimes, he's kind of walked into some traps over the years. But by and large, he's been very dependable when it comes to election forecasting. This is a man who not only raised alarms about George Bush potentially going to attempt to seize an election, right? We talked about that on an earlier episode of The Vanguard a few days ago, if you guys caught that. But he also forecast that Hillary Clinton was going to lose the state of Michigan, that she was going to lose the presidential election. He predicted correctly that Joe Biden was going to win in 2020. And he also correctly in 2022 debunked the hysterical lies that there was somehow going to be a red wave, taking over the country as a backlash to Joe Biden's villainous policies. And I think that he's correct again to say, hey, I think Kamala Harris is in a good position to win this race if she responds to this critical piece of advice that he's about to give. So you guys don't go anywhere. Let's watch.
On the show, good to see you. Is Kamala Harris about to lose Michigan? And if so, can she still win the election on November the 5th without Michigan, in your view?
There is a way to win without Michigan. I wouldn't risk it if I were the candidate. I don't. This is the part I don't understand, is that politicians usually will do just about anything to win.
Yep.
And in this case, when you made your appeal to her and I've made mine, you don't have to do a lot.
Yep.
You just have to say that when you're president on January 20th, this ends. The slaughter of civilians ends. I'm not going to continue that. As she said on Stephen Colbert, I am not Joe Biden. That'll be one of the big changes in the new administration. She made it clear that she's not the incumbent. So I don't for the life of me understand why. And what I said to her is, you really just need to go to Dearborn or Detroit, stand on a stage with two Jewish leaders from the area, two Muslim leaders from the area, and just say what the majority of Americans in every poll are saying: end the war, ceasefire now, humanitarian aid immediately to everybody. What is so difficult about that?
And it really is that simple, guys. I mean, the reality is that Kamala Harris is playing with fire right now. She has the ability to win this race overwhelmingly, and she may still win it by narrow margins without coming to the ethical conclusion, coming to the smart political conclusion, coming to the human conclusion that we must stop the suffering that we're bearing witness to in Gaza. Imagine the toll that this is taking on individuals who can see their families, people who have relatives who have been suffering under the siege, this extermination campaign. Let's call it what it is, guys, an ethnic cleansing, a genocide. And you have the ability as a candidate for the presidency of the United States to come out firmly and resolutely against it. And for some reason, guys, Kamala Harris is choosing not to. Now, we can speculate what those reasons are. It could be the overwhelming influence of the financial elite, people involved in the, what we largely refer to as the military industrial complex, right? We could also point to APAC. We could point to all kinds of funding metrics. But the bottom line is Kamala Harris is a human being. She's an individual just like the rest of us, and she has to have a heart and soul down there. And if it's imperative that we all consistently and repeatedly call on her to do the right thing, because as Michael Moore mentioned in the beginning of this video, it's not incumbent on these Arab American communities, these people in Dearborn, Michigan, and areas like it, to swallow their pride, swallow their morals, swallow the last shred of dignity that they have, and vote for somebody who's persecuting their people to this degree. Are you kidding me? Now, I, as a American, privileged white man in Kansas City, Missouri, I do intend to swallow the apple in my throat and vote for Kamala Harris and vote for Tim Walz and stave off the legitimate fascist threat of Donald J. Trump. But I can never ask somebody so closer to that than me, right? I know what kind of pain, I know what kind of anxiety, I know what kind of fear and disgust and anguish that this is all boiled up in me. And I can only imagine what it's like for somebody who has a real lived connection to this in a way that I can only look at through my phone. But let's keep watching, guys.
How does that say
Do
that
you
you
think-
no longer?
Do you
no
think that
longer
they're worried?
supporting-
Do you
Yeah.
think that they're worried that if they were to do that, number one, they're picking a fight with AIPAC and the pro-Israel lobby, which they don't want to do
Well,
with weeks to go, and number two, they'll lose some Jewish voters in Pennsylvania or Michigan on the other end?
I don't I don't believe that.
No, I don't
I-
either. But I'm just saying maybe they do.
Yeah. Well, then she's listening to the wrong advisors.
Yeah.
She should stop listening to the men around her, telling her the same old stories, and also putting Jewish voters in such a condescending light. Let me tell you something. First of all, the Jewish and Arab communities in Detroit and in Michigan have actually always gotten not only along,
Yeah.
worked hand in hand with each other for all kinds of issues: social justice, peace, the environment.
And this is true across the country, right? We see this a lot in places like New York City, where you see a large cross-pollination of people of all kinds of faiths, notably people who are immigrating to this country. I mean, obviously, New York City was one of the first, safe harbors for a lot of Jewish folks fleeing anti-Semitism in the 19th century, right? And then you have the 20th century coming, in the early 21st century, you see a lot of, Islamic people of the Islamic faith, Arabic Americans, that kind of shit. You know what I mean? Anyway, I'm sloppy with the nomenclature. You guys get what I mean.
You name it. There's just a very long history of this, and to say that, oh, if she says one little positive word about stopping this war, she's going to lose Jewish voters. Let me tell you, that for my whole life in Flint and in Detroit, they're not going to abandon their centuries old values and beliefs in social justice,
Yes.
in not killing civilians.
And it's worth noting that those exact Jewish communities that I was discussing were big elements of the 20th century labor effort that we saw. I mean, when you're talking about leftist thought in America, it's inseparable from the Jewish intellectuals of the early 20th century.
All the things that we know that we grew up with in Detroit and Flint with our Jewish brothers and sisters were very similar to the values of the Muslim community and the mosques in our area. And when she spoke at that first rally in Detroit, right after the announcement that she was the candidate, and if you remember, that was it was a big crowd there. There were protesters there inside,
Yes.
chanting about to stop the war, and that was where she made that very sad and infamous statement to the protesters: "Hey, I'm speaking.
Yeah.
You be quiet." And it was very much that, but I know I wasn't there, but I know they're all people, friends of mine, and people that were there in that crowd that were chanting. And, I can't give you the exact number, but I'd say at least a third of them were Jewish that were chanting, and
So-
not in my name.
So it's interesting you mention that finger wagging. She also said that day, and she's improved her rhetoric since then, but that day
Yeah.
she said, oh, well, do you want Trump? She said some version of,
Yeah, I know.
the alternative
No,
is Trump.
Nobody wants Trump.
So
and
in
fact,
some Arab Americans in Dearborn have actually endorsed Trump, interestingly
well,
enough.
no.
A
No, let me
minority.
just go back.
A minority, but
Mehdi,
yes.
Mehdi, yeah, in 2020, 1/3 of the Arab and Muslim vote in Michigan voted for Trump,
Yeah. So
and 70% voted for Biden and Harris.
so here's my question, Michael.
And that's such an important thing from Michael Moore. And that's the last of this clip that we'll react to. But they're going to try and position this as if it's going to come down to the Arab American vote, or it'll come down to the black male vote in Detroit or in Michigan or Wisconsin or wherever, right? And they'll say, look, Kamala Harris, you lost all of this support amongst the black men. They went for Donald Trump. They fell for his charade. They fell for his used car salesman crap, right? And they'll act as if it was some sort of grand failure, when in reality, 76%, the last poll numbers I checked, of black men in Michigan are supporting Kamala Harris, right? And they'll say, oh, well, that's 24% that aren't. Yeah, well, any other demographic where you have 76 to 24% support, that's called a landslide. That's called an ass whooping. Okay. And it'll be the same. And again, we don't know how Arab American communities will vote. I think it's very astute for Michael Moore to point out, hey, they're not a monolith. Okay. Last time around, a bunch of people voted for Donald Trump. That's how elections work. Okay. People actually make up their own minds. Just because you are of an ethnicity, just because you are of a background or a religion or a specific, marginalized community in this country doesn't mean that you're going to vote as a monolith, right? So very important to take a look at all of that. I still believe in my heart of hearts that Kamala Harris is positioned to win this election, guys. But I think she would be much better suited if she followed Michael Moore and Mehdi Hasan's advice here in this clip. Go ahead and check out the rest of the interview over at Zeteo. Really appreciate the hard work that Mehdi Hasan's been doing to invest in some new media after he's left MSNBC and Peacock, after they, severed ties with him because of his outspoken and courageous advocacy to end the crisis in Gaza, to end the ethnic cleansing, the genocide in Gaza. So really appreciate Mehdi Hasan's work over there. If you guys like what you saw, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I don't upload here too often, but I'm going to try and start doing more of it. This is the kind of stuff that maybe we might not have time to get to on our main show, The Vanguard. This is just me. This is the Nothing Burger. Peace out, everybody.